Thanks, Sarah, for the introduction, and thanks for the invitation. I've been doubtful through the year that I'm an able person to speak before you, but she was convinced. So I feel that there is an appetite to hear a perspective from a non-traditional donor with a focus on interaction between traditional and non-traditional donors and how the rise of the latter affect the evolution of humanitarian enterprise. And it's not going to be a lecture. I'm not in a position to teach anyone in the room. I base myself on the amount of evidence and remarkable analytical work from the humanitarian knowledge community, which I truly admire and appreciate. So these are just some observations from a mid-rank foreign policy official from an emerging humanitarian donor country who is not dealing with the issue on 24/7 basis. And I'm aware that my presentation may not be telling you anything new that you hadn't not known before. But anyway, bear with me for 20-something minutes or more, and if it's become unbearable, Sarah will interrupt me. And so let me start by reflecting on the terminology, and namely system versus landscape. Your first speaker 2 years back, Yves Dacor, he made this point, DG of the ICRC, he made the point of utility of the latter term, landscape. In 2013, 95 countries contributed to the multilateral interagency response plans. So the action is global and the landscape is. As for the system, the way the system is organized with rules, coordinating center, organizational structures, etc., something with collective responsibility and mutual or peer accountability. It may be in place, although there are different opinions. Yves Dacor stressed, for instance, in his lecture that to assert the existence of an international humanitarian system that possesses the above characteristics is totally misleading and does not correspond to reality, unquote. UN Under-Secretary General Amos, speaking before the ODSG this summer, actually concurred with this opinion, noting that an integrated global system does not exist. Rather, it is made of a multitude of actors with different approaches. I disclaim that I don't know the context she was putting it in. The question remains to be answered. What is the system and what is it to be in the system? Now, can a country like Russia position itself as a part of the system, giving money to UN, giving money to serve, adhering to the principles, or are we in or are we out? And that's indeed a really debate in itself on criteria and who is decide on admission to the system. But let me leave that debate aside for the time being and assume, as it is normally depicted in analytical work, that there is a certain Western designed and anchored system. But it is far from being global and now in jeopardy because of the arrival of newcomers or outsiders. And again, on the terminology of how to call new donors, we can also discuss it because there are different opinions. And the question is how to make this system effectively respond to the challenges it faces. And this question is answered by making it global and inclusive. And this, in turn, somehow is being limited to the admission of new donors to the system and educating them and cleaning their hands and combing their hair, who has it. I may be overestimating, and if you don't share this opinion, just don't listen to anything that will follow, because I base myself on this assumption. Now, globalizing the system is indeed the answer to the challenge, or better term would be universalizing it or making it more inclusive, so inclusive and universal. But let me argue that universalizing the system and accommodating it to new evolving realities is going far beyond the issue of taming and civilizing newcomers and making them play by pre-cooked rules. Indeed, the world is changing and the humanitarian landscape or system is changing along with it. And to a large extent, this change somehow is linked, again, I'm repeating myself, mostly with the emergence and accession to prominence of new donors. And although the greater involvement from countries like Turkey, Brazil, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, China, maybe Russia also, shifts the balance of power, international humanitarian enterprise, as the all evidence shows, for the time being is still dominated by the traditional donors from the north or from the west. The importance of newcomers, nevertheless, is widely recognized, and new actors have taken a larger part in humanitarian action. The amounts of their contributions are on the rise, and different models of partnerships have emerged. The reactions to their presence have been mixed. It's considered both desirable and necessary, with great potential in terms of more money coming, and at the same time risky and problematic. And sometimes the level of anxiety and alarm and analysis on newcomers reminds me of Lord of the Rings Part 2 battle scene when the horde of orcs are attacking the tower. So are the newcomers the threat to the system or not? It can be agreed that new donors is one of the drivers of change of the humanitarian landscape, but should it be singled out as the only one challenge or threat? Modern humanitarian Western-dominated system is undergoing numerous changes, not exclusively because of the rise of the new donors. Humanitarianism is in crisis, stated in 2011 U.S. Institute for Peace Special Report author Soren Jessen-Peterson, a former Assistant High Commissioner for Refugees and UNSG Special Rep in Kosovo. He was citing 6 main causes of the crisis, principally structural and operational in nature, and none of them directly was linked with the new or emerging donors. And these change drivers, both external and internal challenges to the system, are well known. The external one, or the global context, easily quoted, enormous and ever-increasing humanitarian needs, magnitude of the natural man-made complex emergencies, proliferation, intensification of internal conflicts targeting civilian population, protracted crises, violation by parties to a conflict of their obligation under international humanitarian law, and the international community's inability, collective inability to resolve them. There is a widespread feeling that the global war on terror has resulted in an erosion of humanitarian principles. Now, millions of people living in hard-to-access areas, refugees, IDPs, protracted displacement, food insecurity, malnutrition. You all know it much better than and the list is not complete. And other drivers and challenges to the system are internal and have to do with, I quote, evident increase in weaknesses facing the system, humanitarian sector itself. Now, humanitarian action often becomes subsumed under a political or military agendas. Feinstein International Center Humanitarian Agenda report of 2006, quote, in high-profile crises, prevailing northern political and security interests trump humanitarian concerns. In such circumstances, humanitarianism is directly and most dangerously under threat, and independent and neutral humanitarian space is the first casualty. Many humanitarian agencies and their donors too easily and uncritically accept the conditions for involvement set by the military. Coherence and integration, in its meant with peacekeeping efforts, have now become euphemism for the subordination of principles to political objectives. And this was a collection of quotations from the analytical work of my audience, some of you. I didn't invent that. Humanitarian enterprise is vulnerable to manipulation by powerful political forces far more than is widely understood. In turn, increasing militarization and politicization of humanitarian efforts have led to growing dangers for humanitarian workers, who in the middle of conflicts face a constant risk of being perceived as taking sides and being partisan. This problem of perception is aggravated by the fact that key military forces often come from the countries that are also donors to the humanitarian organization. In too many operations, the presence of a noticeable number of humanitarian NGOs from the north give way to the perception in many countries in the south that humanitarian operations are an integral part of a political strategy to maintain and increase the power and dominance of the north and the west. Of course, there are also recipients where the western nature of humanitarian enterprise is not in itself an issue. Now, the failure of humanitarian emblems to command respect again underscores the vulnerability of humanitarian action, but also the perception that it's seen as partisan. Security concerns lead to the lack of stay and deliver approach that allows humanitarian actors to reach communities in the midst of conflict when it matters most and to stay at their time of greatest need. Absence from the field location, risk aversion and concentration on the easiest to reach population. Again, another thing, disparity in funding patterns reflects the reality that high-profile crises attract disproportionate resources, while forgotten and often more deadly emergencies continue to fester. Finally, humanitarian action is self-defined by those who practice it with little or no consideration for different approaches or traditions aimed at alleviating human suffering. A couple of resume quotations. Failure to address and reverse present trends will result in the demise of an international assistance and protection regime based on time-tested humanitarian principles. It's Feinstein report. And another one, without a vigorous restatement of the principles of humanitarianism, humanitarian action will remain in a state of crisis and continue to be a selective tool for the powerful. And it was said not with regard to the new donors, but to the system as a Western construct. Now, is the traditional largely Western, Northern humanitarian sector ready to acknowledge the internal failings of the system and accept that the principled aid is in jeopardy, not because newcomers are eager to come and play by their own rules, but because of the shift or departure of international humanitarian actors away from the basics they strive and claim to ground themselves upon? Accommodating the system to the new realities and challenges requires a rethinking, a redesigning effort, linked to, but going beyond the issue of new donors. So it is crucial for players and stakeholders in the traditional Western system to acknowledge, among other things, that they must change themselves. The international humanitarian system, as it stands, collectively identifies itself through a set of the core humanitarian principles, right? And it is assumed by definition somehow that traditional stakeholders by default provide the principled assistance, whereas all others not. Being driven by other norms, policies, approaches, foreign policy interests, etc. And therefore, their integration to the system put the principled assistance in jeopardy. I will come back to the newcomers, but let me just put a question mark on this issue that traditional Western donors, humanitarian assistance is always impeccably principled and not being driven by same foreign policy consideration, geopolitical concerns, you name it, etc. On the other hand, new donors are perceived as being driven by whatever ground, but not the principles. It is not correct. Listen to the statements on humanitarian assistance issues in the UNGA or in ICASOC. There is not a single statement where the respect to the principles of the UNGA Resolution 46182 is not highlighted as the ground for a country's policy. This fact is reflected in analytical work, but still somehow it's being felt by the humanitarian knowledge community that these statements are only lip service thing. Yes, newcomers come with their own baggage of history, traditions, cultural context, norm, and values. Lack of clearly stated conceptual grounds, topped by lack of clearly structured internal aid architecture in terms of budget and personnel and institutions. Yes, indeed, but as it has been acknowledged again, there is no homogeneous or pure and legitimate conception of humanitarian action. And the truth is that indeed, the issue of the extent modern humanitarian assistance is principled needs to be raised. But it is equally relevant for the entire spectrum of assistance providers, both new and traditional. Both parts of the community do respect the principles and do not. Is Western assistance truly and always principled? Do we know how practice follows the commitments on paper for traditional donors? I may not know, maybe there are research work or something, but there is a clearly lack of understanding how you guys are faring with regard to that. And the thing is that the West should drop the copyright mark and accordingly sort of hereditary rights to the principled assistance. Everyone supports the principles, and non-Western stakeholders feel that they own the principles as much as their partners do. But obviously, the so-called operational interpretation of the principles varies widely within both groups, and of course, between the groups as well. And the acknowledgement that we, traditional donors, are not that perfect vis-a-vis the principles will help a lot in gearing the global system towards inclusiveness and sustainability in terms of reacting to the challenges at hand, rather than focusing exclusively on taming non-Western concepts of humanitarianism. So the issue of principles being in jeopardy and what to do with this is serious and indeed needs to be discussed in a profound manner. For instance, impartiality versus geopolitical consideration or sovereignty versus impartiality. We are blamed for claiming this trade-off, sovereignty versus impartiality, and we need to think is that to what extent it's true. I argue that it's not true. And provocative question, can in modern context the principles be 100% respected at all? Or they should be kept as sort of high watermark reference point to follow while admitting that it's not always feasible in real life to follow them. It was said in one of the analyses with regard to new donors that obviously national humanitarian policies are a finely balanced compromise between foreign policy priorities set by sovereign national governments or unions of governments and humanitarian principles. And I think it's relevant not only to the newcomers, but for the entire spectrum of the assistance providers, aid providers as well. And turning blind eye on their own flaws and departures from the best practices will not open the door for the newcomers to join the system. Integration of southern players will only be successful when the traditionals get away from parents to child approach, where parents' role is perceived as to direct, watch, guide, and the children learn, follow, respect, obey, and shut up. It's a mutual exercise of education and development. If you want newcomers to improve and act according to the highest standards, these standards should be the same for you and for everyone. So instead, what we hear is the fault line drawn between the so-called traditional and emerging donors, which should be deleted. Non-Western approaches to humanitarianism are not that alien or unacceptable, and a serious test to the system is therefore to acknowledge that its different parts are equal partners, driven by the same motivation, assist people in need through a principled assistance, and also by self-interests, and are equally responsible for not possibly meeting the highest established standards. And I appeal to the community not to be afraid of the newcomers and understand that their aid is complementary to other donors' aid and thus should not be perceived as competing or threatening. The challenges at task are so huge, so everyone will get a share of a pie. Like the northern system, southern actors have been shaped by past experience, and understanding of these experience over time and their cultural and political context will enable more effective dialogue and partnership. Emerging donors are not a homogeneous group, and their diversity should be acknowledged. And it's been traditionally acknowledged that all emerging donors are bad, but within the group there are bad good and bad bad. For instance, some of them are considered to be willing to join the traditional system, follow the standards. Some of them are faring within good-bad groups. Some of them are faring better, some of them worse, but there is another one who is bad, who is not interested in integration at all, who is fine by themselves, and so on and so forth. And the latter part is complaining about the arrogance of Western donors, and they are keen to avoid terms at all. Avoid, and I'm coming to terminology thing, avoid being called donor at all, in favor of donor assistance aid, in favor of partner and cooperation. And this reminds me of South-South terminology when it comes to ODA. Now, in order to accept and capitalize on the diversity of players, a respectful debate is being advocated for, from this rostrum at least, between traditional donors and organizations and the newcomers on mutually agreeable approach to humanitarian action. And that's the only way towards more universal or more inclusive system. It is important that the international system seeks to understand and be open to the diverse cultural, political, contextual forces that have shaped actors from here and from there. So outreach and pragmatism, not to create divide artificially, concentrate on commonalities, follow UN principles, coordinated heterogeneity. These are the words that we need, we should be willing to follow. Now, where to engage? And what is the likelihood of increased international cooperation, multilateral fora between non-traditional and Western donors over time? Closer cooperation, I believe, is possible. But the perception in my group, for instance, is that existing fora, donor-driven, they're not enough. And it has been noted that non-Western donors are unwilling to join the existing system, and established donors are unwilling to open their circles to what they fear to be potential spoilers. And hence, there is limited rapprochement between two groups. And indeed, the evidence shows that attempts to approach the newcomers through established pro-Western mechanisms have been, for the most part, unsuccessful and led to marginal participation. There is a mistaken assumption that non-Western donors would join the pre-existing architecture just to obey and listen, be a numb and control source of money. But they don't feel that they own the platforms, and that equal partnership hand they don't feel that it's being extended to them. and neither they're convinced that this type of coordination is needed for them. So this is how the mainstream organization process perceived. Frankly, Russia belongs to the bad-good part of the newcomers. We're quite positive, and we try to the extent that allows us to stay within the boundaries of sovereign humanitarian policy, to integrate into the system. We give money to UN. We participate in SURF conference. We participate in ODSG or OCHA donor support group. We are not allergic to good humanitarian donorship initiative, although we have been criticized for not signing up to its principles. Now, what I would say that no initiative should claim or privatize the norm, standards, or principle setting role. And indeed, with all due respect, and we mentioned diplomatic language in the UN, and then with all due respect, when it started like that, something awful will follow. So that's not awful. OECD is doing great job, and again, Russia is trying to join, has been trying to join. I don't know about the perspectives now. Lots of work being done, much of respect, but what I would warn the traditional donor community in particular against, not to repeat what has been happening in the debate of long-term development aid. I'm referring to the Paris-Accra, Rome-Paris-Accra, Busan aid effectiveness process. We're not against, again, the very notion of humanitarian assistance effectiveness, and I know that it is in the plans of the Secretary General for the agenda of Humanitarian Summit, and some thinking is being put on paper by now. We're ready to work on that, but the experience with the Paris process, aid effectiveness process, shows that despite the officially declared success, we should be more sober in our appraisals. Countries are divided, and new players feel pressured to follow Western standards, and frankly, aid effectiveness was a failure in bringing on board the most important non-Western development assistance providers. It didn't happen through the process. So if it is repeated in the humanitarian aid effectiveness process, and I don't deny OECD their deserved role as a great machinery, great think tank, and great convening power platform, but that again would be a failure. From my background, for me, the only solution is the UN. It's not trendy or fancy to support, but frankly, there is nothing else that can unite us and has enough of convincing power to join, to bring everyone on board. And this can be a forum where mutual accountability, and not only peer accountability, that basically what our donors are gearing towards. They want to be peer accountable to their peers, but it should be accountability going beyond, could be ensured only in the UN. But do the donors want it? That's an open question. ECOSOC and GA, it's a good architecture. Again, much criticized, but don't criticize the can because you don't like the beer. I mean, it's not the shell, it's the substance. And if member states are not willing to commit themselves to consensus searching, building exercise, and to open discussions, this is where UN fails. Otherwise, it will work and fly. We have very good architecture, ECOSOC, humanitarian segment, GA. Again, it's a commonplace to say that they're not effective. And frankly, several years back, there was internal brainstorming debate among some delegations in the UN, initiated by the Swiss mission, as far as I remember, to improve architecture and to divide the labor between General Assembly and ECOSOC, because it's being felt that ECOSOC and GA every year repeat themselves, and whatever happens in ECOSOC then is repeated in the GA. So there was an idea to establish a working relationship between both bodies and split the business, where GA will have a normative setting role, policy guidance role, and ECOSOC will work closely on specific issues related to coordination on the ground. And the idea was to create, to split the business and then to create a humanitarian cluster in the General Assembly, because on the agenda of annual session, there are a number of items that can be bundled together related to humanitarian assistance. We have omnibus resolution, we have country-specific resolutions, we have events such as CAP launch, we have SURF conference. If we bundle them together and put them in a single week somewhere in November, December, that could be a huge venue for everyone to come and to organize side events, whatever. It could be a circus of planetary magnitude related to humanitarian assistance where everyone is invited. Now, it is all going to be considered, and I'm closing. I think I went beyond my time allotted, and it's all going to be considered in the humanitarian summit. And as a foreign policy official, I wouldn't put it concerned, but less than concerned, but thinking of the nature of the event, of the outcomes of the event, how it's going to be prepared, what's the run-up, what are the outcomes. The initial thinking was that it will end up with chair's summary or I mean, I'm referring to the, I have it somewhere with me, initial conceptual paper, which is an excellent one prepared by OCHA. An outcome statement or a chairman's summary. Now, speaking to the ODSG, OCHA's director is saying about setting of something like 5 to 7 global level recommendations and concrete actions that are measurable and deliverable over a time frame of 15 to 20 years. So something sounds reminding the Sustainable Development Goals, and I really don't know how it can be possible in the humanitarian area. So it's still in the making. We don't know how it will evolve. As a governmental official, I would have preferred it to be an intergovernmental summit with all the procedure rules, following the procedural rules of the General Assembly, but I don't know if we have time for that. But otherwise, I think it's going to be a messy thing, and I wish us all the best going through it. Now, I'm closing with final thing, and it's a reflection on the system, how the system should look like after World Humanitarian Summit. And I'm not redrafting the humanitarian principles, but one notion that maybe should be raised higher and given higher profile is the universality of assistance. Universality can be understood in different ways. Universality, as the ICRC understands it, as global coverage. Now we have it. I mean, no matter how high profile emergencies or forgotten emergencies are, everything is more or less covered. Then universality is understood as openness of the system and grounding principle of interaction of the old ones and the new ones. So the system is universal. Everyone owns it. Everyone is welcome. Everyone has a say. And finally, universality is the accountability of the system to the recipients. System should work in a way that communities and people in need accept the assistance, understand it. It's being driven by them, but not by other agendas. And this three-tiered principles of universality may be the cornerstone on how the system should like after the summit. I thank you.